So, as you all may be aware, I am Siobhan Hagan, the Memory Lab Network project manager, and I've been the project manager since March of 2018. Lorena Ramirez Lopez was my predecessor. She was working on the first year of the grant, but I've come this March, I'll be on it for 2 years. So this was my first time going through the whole like application process. I had never done that before. But I pretty much came on right before our boot camp for the first cohort. So we've been through all that, and I've been through these webinars that we're giving you today. We actually did these first 3 that we're gonna do. We did in person at our in-person boot camp, which was like Monday to Friday in DC, long days. And it was really exhausting and a lot of information for everyone and a lot of time to be away as well from your job and families and lives. So we sort of tried to cull it down. You know, all the information is really important, but we were like, can we do this in bite-sized chunks and some of it remotely, and try and save the in-person boot camp for the real meat of the stuff that you can't really do virtually, and do the more hands-on stuff in person. And hopefully we'll have some cool tours for you guys as well at local big DC institutions. So that should be really fun. And we're gonna also make time to just hang out together and get to know one another, because that's a really important part of this too. And yeah, also I want to say congratulations to you guys for being the second cohort. It was a lot, there were a lot of really great applications. It was really hard to, you know, say no to other people, but you guys are amazing and did a fantastic job. So I'm so excited. I can't wait to meet you all in person. So we're just going to get cracking and talk about our Memory Lab DC Public Library model. And first we'll start about, you know, where it came from, and apologies if you've heard this at, you know, presentations over the years, but it's an important part of understanding our model, and then the model that, how we take that model and turn it into your memory lab. So our first, DCPL's first digital curation librarian, which is under our special collections department, was created only probably about 5 or 6 years ago to manage digitization and digital preservation for special collections. So there's digital, anything digital in the title, you know, it's about public access through digitization. And to digital files. So they wanted to do it right, and they wanted to, you know, go to the public for digitization as well, not just within special collections, but there was a demand that they were seeing once the digital curation librarian came on. That was Lauren Algie. Basically anything with digital, she got called about. And so much of the public, you know, wanted the ability to digitize their collections, but we wanted to do more than just, you know, provide scanners and sort of have it become more programmatic. Yes. So the partnership formed between special collections, where there is that digital, you know, digitization and preservation expertise, and then our labs department, where they're focusing on like digital literacy as far as, and not just digital, but also like, you know, they have sewing machines, and it's just about more STEM and STEAM education, and making that accessible to the public. So there's an obvious sort of, you know, partnership that developed there. And they partnering between Lauren Algie from Special Collections and then Nick Kralchik, who was the head of the DCPL labs at that time. They wrote a grant or an application for a National Digital Stewardship Resident. And, they wrote it hoping that NDSR, if you hear that, that's what that is, National Digital Stewardship Resident, that NDSR could create, that they could, like, DCPL could create a national model through having an NDSR resident work on creating this program for public digitization. So they got that, and Jamie Mears came on and was the NDSR resident that built the Memory Lab. And so you can follow along her journey at the blog that she kept during the time, jamiemears.wordpress.com. And the result was, as you know, a Memory Lab digitization physical space, a lab, resources, online resources, and classes for the public. And there's Jamie, there she is, and this is in our older MLK library, which is being renovated right now. So this wasn't something DCPL had the resources or woman power, person power to do on their own. So it was really integral to have the NDSR host, or to be an NDSR host and to have the fellow, to have Jamie. Jamie had no experience with AV digitization, and though Lauren Algie had a formal archiving education and experience working in archives, personal archives is quite a different animal. So I'm sure a lot of you have found yourselves in a similar boat or predicament, dealing with, you have your own expertise, but your current job and or the public is demanding other things. So that's where NDSR really came in, and giving Jamie the time, working full time to create all of this really important information and resources to build this, to not just build our lab, but then to help other people think about building it for themselves. So this included a literature review, figuring out, I'm sure this took, just from my own experience, I'm sure this took a lot of time, learning the internal ins and outs of DC Public Library and how to, build within that system and, bureaucracy. And then also she took a lot of time to form external partnerships, and she reached out to a lot of experts and did a lot of research, figuring out what equipment and what workflows were going to be best for a public digitization lab. And she did a lot of programming, tried some things out, some things didn't work, some things really did. She did a lot of staff training, that's an important part, and launched the lab and evaluated it. So then there's also, you can read Jamie's final report. There's a link in this slide deck, but also it's on our website, which I'll show you at the end. So the lab opened at MLK's, the central branch of DCPL, the Martin Luther King Jr. Library. But then it moved to Northeast in April of 2016, I believe. Wasn't there once again, maybe it was 2017, for the I think it was 2017, for the renovation. So 2 stations can be booked through an online reservation system. And within a month of opening at MLK, both were booked 2 months in advance. So there are 3-hour sessions that you book them for. And the one station is for AV. You've got your VHS, VHS-C, DV, mini DV, audio cassette, those classic compact cassettes. And we also have the ability to just kind of transfer over some 3.5-inch floppies, the files off of that. And then the other station is for photo, document, slide, and negative scanning. We also do weekly 1-hour drop-ins. It's every Wednesday, but then every other Saturday, typically, to allow for people who work during the week to make it. The VHS deck and the scanner, that photo document slide and negative scanner, those are our most used and most popular by far and away. And very anecdotally, our biggest users are retirees, creatives, creative professionals, and stay-at-home parents. It's a small do-it-yourself space right now in a computer lab that is managed by branch staff in coordination with lab staff, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later and how that's changed with the move to Northeast. And then, the lab hours are just based on the appointments that people schedule, and those we do allow for drop-ins, but and then that drop-in weekly drop-in orientation 1 hour. That is, people do sign up for that, but we allow people to drop in for that. Also, that is not required. We do not require people to attend that in order to use the memory lab. So this is just showing you where it was at MLK before it got moved. So it was a very large, computer lab. And then this was a small space within that with these really cool, I think that's microfilm curtains that Jamie made, and which gave it a nice, like, semi-private feel. And it was managed, like I said, by branch staff, but in coordination with the lab's staff. And then here we have the Northeast Neighborhood Library, which is where it currently is living, our memory lab. And this is also where we're going to be having the majority of our boot camp. We will be hanging out in that upstairs mezzanine where we can just look down upon the memory lab, which will be great. But you can see here, we're pointing towards where it has that big memory lab do-it-yourself digitization on the wall. It's basically just the side of a wall in the computer lab in a small branch library. But it is about 10-minute walk from Union Station, so it's as centrally located. DC is pretty vast, so it's tough. I'm pretty sure it was tough to figure out which one to put it in, but it is pretty accessible as much as it can be without it being at MLK. So that's what it looks like now, our 2 stations. And then, do it yourself means we need really good instructions, and especially since we don't require people to attend the orientation. So in our LibGuide, which I have the URL up top there, we include best practices, notes and resources for physical preservation and links to free tools and all kinds of resources. We had a difficulty of weighing our archival best practice against what public needs are, and what our resources are as well. So, and as we were planning on making this a model for other public libraries, considering that there could be many with even fewer resources than we have. So really thinking about, the best practices of file quality and storage, digital preservation storage for especially audiovisual files. We had to weigh those, and we had to make some decisions that I think are very valid and very good. It's just justifying and then also giving the patrons that information and saying, hey, we are a, not fully preservation best practices, but let me tell you why. And then once you tell them why, typically they're like, oh, thank you. I don't want 100 gigabyte and now 100 gigabytes per hour file to try and take care of. So we're building preservation into digitization as well in our guides, which that's in the lab tab there. We have information on metadata and file naming, and we try and get them to embed some basic minimal metadata, but we can only do so much once they walk out the door. you might also want to consider printing your workflows out and having a nice binder for someone, because looking at the computer and digitizing at the same time might be a little tough. So I know we have a binder that we also provide. So the programming is really where that when they walk out the door comes in. Jamie developed and tested curricula and then trained our staff on teaching critical thinking rather than specific tools that will change or disappear very quickly. And we've had to update some of these slides because of that. So it's mostly how to evaluate software, social media, and storage platforms to meet your long-term needs, whatever those are. So it was Jamie came up with the first 3 classes: the Digital Preservation 101, Digital Estate Planning, which I believe is now called Your Digital Afterlife, because people thought that there was going to be like a lawyer there and they were going to come up with a living will or something, which is not what happens. And then Digital Archiving and Social Media. So those were the first 3 that Jamie came up with. And then when I jumped on, once I heard about all the various questions and needs that the public were still bringing to the Memory Lab, like, why can't I digitize my high 8s? Why can't I digitize my Super 8 film, my 16mm film? How do I store these now? Those are, or like, can I have a vendor? Can you recommend a vendor to me? I decided to utilize basically the Digital Preservation 101 slide deck that Jamie created, and I turned it into Preserve Your Home Movies, like 101 basics, so that it answered all these questions that people have, mostly helping them identify their home movies so that they know what they can bring into the Memory Lab or not. And then going through like those critical thinking skills and that literacy, that home movie preservation literacy, and further resources for them to go to figure out, we can't tell them what vendor to use, but we can teach them how to evaluate a vendor and the questions that they should ask. And so then there are other events that we consider part of the programming. And this is more indirect, like outreach, trying to get people and different types of communities into the Memory Lab. So partnerships are key with this. It's very popular across the board with local senior centers. We're lucky enough in DC to have places like National Museum for African American History and Culture, Smithsonian American Art Museum as well. And then we have, there's a local historian that we came up with a community history project to bring community scanners out. That's documenting DC in 1968. So that like went through in 2016, 2017 with all of the big events that we were doing in 2018 to like celebrate 68 in DC and to discuss the history, which there's so much. And then, of course, all kinds of workshops for, Preservation Week or Archives Month. There's also a thing called DC Zine Fest, which we were a part of because we took a lot of the information that we have on basics, and we turned them into 3 volumes of this zine called Maximum Preservation. So the first one is about your physical stuff, so papers mostly, and then like best storage for it. Don't write with pen on the back of things, stuff like that. And then we have our Maximum Preservation 2, Electronic Boogaloo, which is all about digital preservation and taking things off of floppy disks and then what to do with your digital files. And then the third one we made after I joined on, and it was taking that preserving your home movie basics and making our third one, which is home movie preservation. So, and just to give you a little bit of background, I guess I should have done that already. Just on my background is that I have a BA in film production and history minor. And then I went and got my master's at NYU in the moving image archiving and preservation program. So that's why I am very like home movies, you know, like this is my wheelhouse. This is like what I studied, what I know a lot about. And so it seemed like a really easy fit for me to jump in and just be like, let's do something and take a lot of resources already out there and make it about home movies. Another event to mention too is Home Movie Day, which we will talk about later, but it's something that happens in October every year to celebrate home movies, and it's happens around the world. It's such a obvious, you know, hook into the memory lab. So I really want to encourage you all eventually to have your own home movie days as well. So how does our memory lab work? You can see here our, like this is where you go to sign up for your it's basically the Acuity front facing form that people use to sign up. So it's do it yourself, as I mentioned. Room is booked by this central reservation system, which is Acuity. And this also is where we're getting the majority of our stats from. So we are, you know, like I said, have drop-in sessions twice weekly, approximately. Every now and again, someone needs a Saturday off, so then we won't do one on a Saturday. But those are mostly for folks that are nervous about getting started, might not have as much background in just like working with computers anyway. And another thing to point out at this juncture, since you guys are cohort 2, the majority of our cohort 1 partners have made their orientations mandatory. So that's something that we'll support you on, because I really think that is, I think that we, especially at our MLK branch, because there's more staff there, there's more branch staff there, and that's also where the what department is that? Labs department is going to be based, and special collections is going to be based there too. So there's way more support for questions as people are there doing their, you know, doing their stuff themselves. But right now in Northeast, I know it's been tough because there's really only one librarian who is really an expert in it and can help troubleshoot a lot. Because it's just whoever's sitting on the reference desk is who is going to be helping them with their questions at this point. So the users are responsible for their storage, their digital storage, and we try and make that, say that multiple times across the, you know, in reminder emails, in the form, in all kinds of, you know, stuff online. And we give them a lot of information about where to get that, how to get that, how to evaluate it, how to format their hard drives and things like that. Then we also have a waiver or a release form, and then they check in upon arrival and get set up with the librarian at the reference desk. There's also an exit questionnaire that's pretty minimal, more like, how did you enjoy, you know, your experience? And I would really like to add some more demographic questions, like to gather more stats about our users, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. So also that's just like an idea I have, which doesn't necessarily mean that it'll get implemented into our lab, but that's something for you guys to consider, and we'll talk about another model soon that does do that, and that has come up with some interesting information, which is why I would like to start that. So we've got, as far as staffing goes, labs manages the appointments because they're the ones that use Acuity. And they're the ones that sort of troubleshoot the equipment. Since I'm here too, and I know a bit about AV, then a lot of times people ask me if I can help, and totally love to. And they also teach some classes as well. Then to, you know, something to say is that troubleshooting is really an important part of training your staff. Equipment and the software fail a lot. So it's good to have backup equipment. You need to regularly clean your decks and calibrate your scanner. It just takes time to build in, and training. So I'm trying to give you guys as much training as possible to pass on to your staff in order for them to do that work. But just know that it's not anything you did wrong, that the stuff isn't working. Like, it's just how it is. I know initially when I first started working with AV archives, because when you're in a production atmosphere, there's like where I initially came from, it's like, move it, move it, move it. Things are going wrong. That's wasting time, that's wasting money. But like in archives, we're working with this very old equipment that there's so many workarounds we have to deal with. So just like, it's cool, it's fine. You can just like take a nap, come back to it. I always think that sleeping on things or eating something protein filled is always a good, for me, it's always been like, I'll wake up the next day and I'll be like, oh my gosh, duh, like that button was accidentally pressed in. So that's just something to think about. One interesting thing that DCPL does, I think that is great, is this SMART goal. I'm sure the SMART stands for something, I can never remember it. But that's where across I think it's 26 branches of DCPL, all of the staff, basically, like, you have to have your SMART goals for the year and you sign up for them. And it's basically to help out in other departments. So you learn what other departments are doing, but then you add some new skills, and you're also helping them. So I think that's super cool. And so there have been, library assistants and librarians across the branches that have signed up for digital preservation classes, and they get training at the beginning of the year, and then they go and teach these classes that we have, and take them out to their branches. So it's that's a cool model in and of itself. And that's been actually going now for 3 years. So I already mentioned the troubleshooting. There are also working groups that we have. We have a working group for the memory lab that includes the people across the branches that really have a stake in the memory lab currently. So that's been helpful, but definitely having a person in charge you have to make sure that you have one person in charge to be able to schedule those groups, because sometimes when you have multiple departments, it can get lost a little bit because no one is necessarily in charge of this memory lab. So anyway, that is the most I have to say about staffing. I want to make sure we can get through everything. Outreach and promotion, as we already mentioned, think about integrating this into whatever you already have in your library, and community activities you're already doing, which is a lot of in your applications. You guys mentioned a lot of those things, and so we want you to build on that. We have had launch events that celebrated Black History Month, film and family, and then giving lab tours to people. And always think about press coverage and putting press releases out there to get media coverage, because we have a lot of our partners have gotten local media coverage. People love it, love to talk about the memory lab and to talk about the memories that are being preserved. You want to have a web page within your library that's going to have your resources and info about yourself, so people can just Google and find you. And then there are other like fun, swag type of stuff that people like postcards. I'll send you a digital version of our postcard that tells people everything that they want to know about the memory lab. And then, like we said, we have zines. Our preservation zines also all point back to the memory lab. And then you guys can also, we have the zines up online on our LibGuide, so you can print them out and make them and give them out to your public. It's not information that's specific to DC. So partnerships are so huge. The majority of the equipment that came, like especially the professional equipment that we're using now for our memory lab was from the Dance Heritage Coalition. So we were really lucky about that. This is, like I said, a slew of other places that we've partnered with, and some of them have actually gone ahead and then like donated some money to the foundation that went directly into directly to the memory lab, because they're so impressed with working with us. So that's just something, you know, we also take our home movie day out to Sun Cinema, where we like ask our Sun Cinema is a small like art house cinema that's in a row home in Mount Pleasant, and they have a little bar, and it feels very like you're in someone's living room, just hanging out. And so we brought home movie day to Sun Cinema, and we've had 3 now, and they've always been a packed house for how small it is, and people love it. But basically what we do is we ask people that have used the memory lab to submit their own digital video files, and then we kind of curate and edit it into about 45-minute show, like a highlight reel. Also because I just love editing and I miss it, so that's like a find what you like and what you want to spend more time on, and then, you know, go with that. So anyway, that's a model that's been successful, and that has also just been really fun, is taking the memory lab out of the libraries, right? And at least like the work and the end result, taking that out, because that's more easy than taking all of the equipment out, trust me, we tried. So, you know, obviously, I think a lot of you are interested also in a memory lab to collect local history, but this isn't our priority. The public is our priority, and, you know, education is, this preservation literacy is, access, and then also a trust, to build a trust that we're not about taking things away, we're about giving knowledge. So, you know, most user material, most things that people bring in are not within our scope, especially in DC, where a lot of people are transplants and did not grow up here. So that would not be within our special collections. It's very, you know, DC based. So, but we want to make sure, you know, that the users know what they can do. You know, we ask them if they would like to donate, or if they're interested in donating to special collections. It's an opt-in kind of thing. It's just sort of says like, would you like to be contacted to see if your content would be, you know, potential. We try and make it as vague as possible. Like, we're not promising we're gonna collect it. And so, you know, we've gotten a handful of those, but honestly, like a lot, just that's not our focus. So, and then also there's, we are working on when we're at MLK, there's obviously like way more opportunities to have personal archiving and archiving literature, physical books there in the lab. So right now they're at special collections, but we want them, we're working on getting some to Northeast too. So, and as we mentioned, like community scanning days, we have done this before, either going out with the scanners or even bringing organizations in or potential donors in, and bringing them into the memory lab and being like, hey, you want to see those movies? Let's do that. And using it, especially like Fridays, we're not open to the public because they want to take a break at the branch. So that's usually my day, that if special collections wants to bring in a potential donor to look at some stuff, then it's sort of like, yeah, well, Fridays are a good day. And then, you know, we just have to make sure that the special collection staff knows what they're doing. So anyway, that's also potential partnership, but then to bring in collections for you guys. So here's the model I was talking about before at Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, this recollection studio. I got to visit it in May, I think. I was there for a Personal Digital Archives conference, and they have a nice setup. It's, you know, small. Once again, they have VHS and audio cassettes on one side, And then they have another separate one for scanning of photos and slides and things like that. But then this area, they have multiple scanning stations, and one in particular that's for the public. So this whole room is specifically for like their internal digitization for their collections, their special collections as well. So this is a closed but windowed room in a central library, local history division, and I think they have 2.5 hour appointments. Once again, it's do it yourself, but you know, there needs to be a librarian there to watch, make sure, answer questions. Typically they have a librarian working on scanning some of their stuff while, just so they're getting something done while they're in there. But I'm there, you know, I have another PowerPoint that tells you a lot more about their model, and that they, in particular, their exit interview is, they shared their exit interview with me, and they've gotten a lot of really interesting demographic information, which helps them realize that they are not, that, you know, where their weaknesses are, where their strengths are, as far as like outreach goes, and who's using lab. Is it representative of your overall users of your library? So that's something that you want to think about, and that we want to think about. So another model is Madison Public Library. It's a personal archiving lab where you can do these types of formats, and it just fits on a cart, you know, an AV cart, and so they can kind of roll it around. And you know, the main thing is that it's basically, you know, it's not, I think that they just kind of made it, like, put it together so easily and quickly, and it was sort of a personal project of a staff member, and they cobbled it together, and there's not a lot of presence out there about it on their website. They just kind of, like, if people request things like, oh, I really like to digitize this, that, then they just put it on their calendar and work it within that. So it's a much more simple, and you know, easier on the staff model that is out there, that we've definitely thought about for our first cohort. Then we've got this really pretty looking, the University of Wisconsin model that was created by Professor Dorothea Salo. And it's basically, if I ever talk about RAD, or if someone talks about RAD, then that's what they're talking about, these kits that are, you know, mailable for obsolete digital media and AV digitization. And they have tons of documentation online to build your own. So, and then a guide to finding equipment and things like that. So this is a great model out there, especially if you're looking to make something more portable. So the main conclusions initially with our memory lab were that strategic partnerships, you know, outside, you definitely need to work with internally with multiple departments, especially if you're a bigger library system like DCPL, but outside your organization, partnering is key. We reached out to local AV experts, which there are a lot of in DC, to help with the equipment and the transfer workflows. I also, I'm going to say this multiple times, encourage you guys to reach out to local TV news stations and the people that work there or used to work there, because they've got this stuff in their garages or their warehouses or whatever. So, you know, obviously, since it was like booked 2 months in advance, there's an overwhelming need for these services. And then from all the people that, like, once we had press out there and people started learning about the project, so many people contacted DCPL asking how they could build one. So, you know, basically we found that this model was extremely important and needed to be our next priority. And it shouldn't be a privilege, you know, the information of preservation and knowing how to take care of your stuff shouldn't be a privilege. And so just along those lines, like, public libraries are kind of perfect for that. They're already doing that with all types of information. And the transfer station is not enough, even though that's like the sexiest part and everyone loves talking about the lab, the physical lab. But we need all of the 3 tiers of, you know, or the 3 legs of a stool of a memory lab, so that to teach preservation, because preservation is not just digitization, you know, and to teach your communities that it's an ongoing thing they need to do. Like, you know, you take care of your body by exercising and eating well, you need to do the same thing with your physical stuff. You need to regularly plan things in to take care of it and to do preservation. It's all about critical thinking, and a lot of times people are going to ask you about tools, and that's okay. You can mention tools, but just know that you're going to have to update that slide. And you know, once that, and you're going to have to stay on top of what tools are the best tools right now. So that's also something within the network that we really want to be able to create a space where we can help you with that, and that will be sustainable, where we can all help each other stay in the know, and we don't all have to do that labor. So also, like personal archiving and personal digital archiving, it's very new. So sharing, it's a new field, you know, a lot of this information is new and intriguing, and we need to share it in order to help it grow. And you know, even though we all have different communities, it's amazing the similarities. So obviously we felt like there were so many questions that people asked, like, how can I build one? Would, you know, help, that we wrote the IMLS Institute of Museum and Library Services grant to get the Memory Lab network going. This is our first cohort. So when we see you guys in January, we'll be taking your photographs and then adding you to the map. And so you can see we're literally all over the map, and you guys will hopefully learn a little bit more about them all, our first cohort, when we meet in person. So the memory lab for the, so what needs to be in your memory lab, that is the main thing that I'm going to talk about next. At the minimum, we've come to the conclusion that these yellow highlighted formats are the best start to your memory lab. These are the most popular pieces of equipment, far and away, so that's where we need to start. As I said, a lot of what we got for our memory lab, you know, you might be like, oh, I want that big rack, or I want the fancy this and that. A lot of what we got was donated from the Dance Heritage Coalition. So, you know, it's going to be different. Yours is going to be different. But depending on funding, let's see where we go. But this is the basics of what you're going to get. There are, you know, other pieces of equipment that you could get donated as well. That's why I'm saying go to those local local TV stations, because you could get stuff and then we can cross that off the list, and then we can buy you a mini DV deck or something. So that's something to think about. And I just want to manage you guys' expectation that you're not going to have, you might not have this big, you'll have that big scanner, I promise you, but you're probably not going to have this big rack, and you're probably going to thank me that you're not going to have this big rack. So for your memory lab equipment, despite just saying like, oh, you're really only going to be able to do basically like 2 formats, or like AV and then scanning station, you're still going to need a bit of equipment. And this is what we've narrowed it down to. And I get the picture on the right shows the sort of the signal flow, which we will talk about more later. But basically this is where everything connects, and all this equipment connects. So you'll get an SVHS deck. We also recommend, we can't buy you any of them, but I promise you, as soon as you ask your community to bring in consumer VCRs, they will. They'll be so glad to get it out of their, you know, garages. So also a monitor, just like an old school CRT monitor, a time-based corrector, also known as a TBC, which we will talk about. You don't need to know what that is right now. A VHC adapter, which is just, it looks like a VHS cassette, but it just takes the little VHS. An analog to digital converter, that's where the magic happens, taking those analog signals and making them digital. A power conditioner, also you don't need to know what that is right now, but it really does do exactly what it sounds like. And then a specific type of computer that has these specs, technical specs, otherwise you're not going to be able to capture this stuff. You need at least 8 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage for your AV computer. So, which we will be buying you. You're going to have to provide the PC for the scanner, but that needs much less. And I will provide you the specs of what those are, because they're pretty minimal, but they're not as bad as this. But typically we find like your IT has one of these computers lying around. But also, once again, we can discuss if that is an issue. It's not, we're gonna make sure you have a scanning station. And as I said, the large flatbed scanner, which actually is the thing that takes up almost the majority of the budget. It's like $3,500 now. So, but it's very fancy. So some other things to think about and consider with your equipment, you know, purchasing things for our first cohort was way harder than I anticipated. And so I kind of came up with this list of things to consider. You know, we already talked about what can you get from local TV donations. So this is one of the magical things about being in the network is you can see up here, we have LAPL, Los Angeles Public Library, got a massive donation of stuff from a local television station. And then they were able to share with the rest of the network. Like they got so many monitors, and they were able to send a bunch out. We also got a donation from a local TV station, so we were able to send some out. And I'm hoping for the same. I think LAPL still even has a few laying around. So we're hoping for the same kind of thing to happen for the second cohort. You know, you will be asking your patrons also for VCRs that you'll need to test to make sure they work. If they don't work, you'll have to recycle them, but it's doing a public service as well. You will need these consumer decks. We'll get you a nice one, I promise, but you'll find that having professional equipment sometimes is not good when you have not professionally recorded tapes. So we'll learn more about that. And also, I mean, we now have to purchase 7 almost all at the same time for everyone. So some of the stuff is, you know, if they're low on stock, if it's a unique item like a refurbished SVHS deck that we're getting you, that can get really hard. So just want to manage your expectations on that it might be like, oh my gosh, we have to, you know, we're just working with a vendor, we have to work with another vendor in order to find the right, for the right timing. It could get pushed back to a month or two. Just bear with us. It will, you know, there's so much we don't have control over. Our original idea was, when we wrote the grant, was to, you know, replicate the Memory Lab at DC using the same equipment, or most of the same equipment, you know, highlighted, and the same vendors. But many of the items, as we went back to them after, you know, if we bought everything in 2015, and then we're going back in 2017, 2018, really, a lot of the stuff were discontinued or no longer manufactured, like the analog to digital converter that we use. I wish this was still manufactured, and I want to just like sign a petition to Blackmagic to bring it back. But we have to work with what is manufactured at this point. So also, most public libraries are run by their local governments, as you all probably know very well. So there's strict purchasing constraints with what vendors you guys can buy from, probably. Some of you guys don't. If you're working through your foundation too, that kind of gives you a little more leeway sometimes. Depends on the organization. You need to factor in time to look into these things, to fill out the right paperwork if you need to put someone into the system. Also, sometimes you look and you're like, oh, well, here's a vendor that is in our system, and then they're charging way more than what we have in our budget. So these are things to just plan for that you're going to have to deal with. I mentioned our AD converter was something where we were limited by what the technology was available. You know, we wanted a certain quality, but that didn't cost $3,000. I think it's only going to get harder. So let's, you know, we might have to make some sacrifices. So far, so good on the AD converter, but who knows what will happen in the next 6 months. So, you know, it tends to also like kind of happen at the year ends. You know, people do these big, they sell their last of an item in their big sales, and then they stop and they discontinue them. Okay, so anyway, you know, and there are some issues with what we use now, the intensity shuttle for the AD conversion. So like it is supposed to overheat a lot, like very easily. So we added purchasing a laptop cooling pad for it to sit on top of. But it's you know, it's one more thing to purchase, one more thing for you guys to remember to do. So we might, if we have to retool things, we might have to come up with another thing. So this is why it's so hard to be like, here's what you should buy right now, and here's how much money it will be right now. Most of our library partners have IT departments that are PC based and don't like dealing with Macs. We are the same way at DCPL. However, you know, most of them will understand in certain circumstances. I think especially if you have a labs department, we would really like you guys to work with Mac, but also one of our partners was very, very adamant that they would have, that they were not going to work with Mac. So we'll make it work, but it's going to mean potentially more work for you, because all of our workflows are not PC based, they're Mac based. So you're going to have to retool those. But maybe our partner, they will share their workflows, and hopefully you guys can kind of copy from that. So anyway, for several of our partners, making the MemLab mobile is a huge priority from the first cohort, especially rural, where they want to bring it out to other branches. And while that's not necessarily our model, there are other models like the Frederick County, Maryland Public Library's MemLab, which is more mobile. And I am really hoping to bring out that lab, or at least someone from that lab, to our boot camp to have you guys ask questions about that mobility. I think it's really important for, you know, you might cut down on certain pieces of equipment with that when you make it mobile, but you know, I really think it's important to include a power conditioner. Once you learn what that is, it just basically helps you control electricity and the power. If you're taking it from place to place that you don't have control over the facilities, like other branches, that would be really important. But also these can like get really awkward. You can't just like throw it in a case and then pull it out. Sometimes like I've gotten like cut by them because they have these metal edges. So, you know, there's workarounds that you have to do for that, thinking about like moving things in and out. So rather than having them just stay in their rack mounted positions. For a flatbed scanner, you know, it's really great to do transparencies like sides and negatives, and it's oversized and extremely high quality. When we bought it, it was in 2015, the version that we have, I think it's the 11,000. It was $2,500 and it was great. When it came time for us to budget the MemLab network, like after we got the grant and did use the money, you know, the budget that we used for the MemLab, then it was that they updated the model. It's now the 12,000 and it costs $1,000 more than the previous iteration. So that was a huge increase for our budget because we have to do that times 7. That's $7,000 more dollars than we thought we were spending. So we're now realistically aiming for like around 6,500 total, because initially we were hoping to give 5,000 to each partner to build their labs, and that was just obviously not going to happen as soon as we saw that the scanner had increased in price that much. So right now we're hoping for you guys around 6,500. But then we'll see, you know, based on donations and all kinds of things, that some places might have more needs, so they might go over. I don't think anyone will go under, but you know, so just kind of based on needs and what happens, it's not a one size fits all. So lastly, a word about shipping. Don't use the, I really can't, this is my personal recommendation, probably not DCPL's recommendation or anyone through the federal government. My personal opinion is don't use the US Postal Service to ship unique AV items. I was told that that was like the only way we could ship things from DCPL. So we sent, I think, 3 monitors out. These are like, at least cost like $400, $500 probably. They're like professional grade, and through USPS. And luckily it was just one that got just so banged up, I don't even understand, you know, but I think it's just better to go with FedEx or UPS, insure it. We will insure it. And then just because it's really, they don't manufacture these, they haven't manufactured these in a really long time. We just lost that, you know what I mean? Like that's a really unique thing that is very hard to find. So, and now it has to go in a dump somewhere. So like we want to not have that happen again. So that is my, you know, one of my key recommendations. And thinking about space, this is also a lot of stuff that you can read in that article that I think I sent out initially when we were taking applications, but I can send that again if you would like it. So this is just stuff to think about with your space, because now would be the time to start advocating for a space and picking a space. So I have 3 different spaces. Before there was a lab here that that our first cohort chose, and yeah, you can see that they're all really different. So that was really my main thing to show, was that they're very different. You know, these are the considerations you want to take about your physical space. Our lab takes up about like 12 feet by 4 feet. But then also we have that big AV rack for vertical storage. You could buy like half racks that are not quite as sturdy, but since they don't go quite as high, it's not as big of a deal. It's not going to fall on anyone. And those could be on wheels, and that would not be super expensive. I think we can keep that to around $200, maybe under. So that's always good to kind of move things around to be able to go behind and troubleshoot. So I based on our initial estimates, our smallest in the first cohort was 6 feet by 10 feet. And then one of the largest was 12 feet by 23 feet of the space that was being used. So, you know, think about your square footage, your seating. If you have someone that, you know, is in a wheelchair, how are you going to fit them? If they bring a friend or family member, are you going to be able to fit them? You've got these 2 workstations going. How are you going to fit, maybe if everyone brings a friend in a wheelchair? So think about those things. As I mentioned, power is a really important thing. We will provide you with a power conditioner so that at least your most of your transfer won't get interrupted by things like ugly fluorescent lighting, and which can add noise to AV transfers. But you know, think about what happens if your power goes out a lot and someone's in the middle, you know, they're halfway through a 3-hour tape and they have to start over again. So we at least provide you enough. If that is an issue, we can look into getting specific equipment for you that could, you know, negate that. So just think about that and just bring it up with me. Like, I just need to know all of the things that typically go on with your, you know, does the internet go out often? Does your IT want it connected to the network? We recommend you just connect it to the Wi-Fi and not have it connected to the network, so that you don't get any kind of viruses or anything like that. So think about noise. If someone is, digitizing and then playing back their videos and listening to just make sure that they're okay, which is something you want them to do, is that going to really bother the other patrons that are around? And vice versa. Don't put it by like the children's area. Think about lighting. Is there a lot of glare coming from windows that's going to really distract and prevent people from being able to see what they've digitized on a computer screen? How private is it? You don't want it to be too private. You don't want it to be like not private enough. You don't want people to like potentially put certain things in their bags. You want people to feel like there is a certain level of security, especially if there are two people in there. Maybe you have a closed room and these two people don't know each other. They want to know, you want to know that it's a safe space. And once again, I already talked about like mobility, more so of your customers and moving around within the space. Think about how you could scale it as well. Like, what if this does so well, you just have this smaller, just doing VHS, and then what if you get, or either your internal or someone external gives you funds to build it out? Then you have to think about how you're going to scale up, right? So maybe, if you feel like that's a potential, just think about how that might play into your current decision making of spaces. Obviously donations, I've talked about getting them, but then the problem of where to store them is an issue. So I recommend having a random closet or basement or something to store those excess consumer VHS and things like that, which are disappearing very quickly, and you guys are gonna need them to make your lab sustainable. So start, putting out those feelers now about like, where could we store them? It doesn't have to be a great storage area, because if it's a low quality consumer deck, like if something happened to it, we wouldn't super cry, but we really just want potentially somewhere that they're not gonna like get water poured all over them. And then on a timing note, just something to think about that I had never thought about is one of our partner spaces couldn't be used until the end of a year, the end of their year, since it was in a hurricane prone area, and that space they need to have a certain amount of designated spaces in the library for hurricane shelter spaces. And that one for that year had just been designated that. So they couldn't redesignate a space until the next calendar year. So they had to wait and push back. They were ready to open the lab and like start everything, but they had to wait until that was no longer a shelter in place, designated area. So think about that as well. Basically, there's no such thing as a cookie cutter memory lab, which is what we really wanted to be able to just be like, here's the model, go for it, but that's not how it works. They're like snowflakes. Each one is unique. Creating a memory lab for the network is a balancing act between DCPL's needs as like this granting, sort of sub-granting agency, and how we need to go back to IMLS and do what we said we were going to do. We also need to follow like our internal regulations and rules and procedures. But then we also need to balance these needs with your needs, and mostly focusing on all of these things that I mentioned here of scalability, compatibility with your systems and what you already do, the expense of everything, how mobile you want it, and then like the quality of equipment that we're able to get and that you guys might get donated. So LAPL our LA Public Library needs to be able to scale much larger, since they received that huge donation of broadcast equipment. And also that makes sense based on their users. They're in Los Angeles with a lot of broadcast users, a lot of professional AV and creative professionals. So that makes sense. But then our partner Karuk tribe in Northern California is in a very rural area, and they have multiple locations. One of them is 50 miles away from the other, and they need to prioritize mobility of their lab to be able to move between the two sites and in order to really reach their community. So these are just, this is this balancing act that we'll have to make. I wanted to end on this, thinking about space. This is our Pueblo City County Public Library in Colorado. And they had chosen this first space on the left. And they were gonna like take all those microfilm readers out and put it in. And then I'm not sure what happened, but then they got moved to this other space at number 2. So here's where they got all their equipment, and they're just kind of like loading it out, and then here it is all together. And it's one of our, like, you can see that you don't really need a very large footprint with this one either, and that it's integrated very much into the rest of the library. So yeah, that's and it's one of our, like, it's doing really well, very successful, and yeah, so that is my presentation. I want to really quickly end on, I think I have hopefully hit you guys over the head enough with our, if you visit memorylabnetwork.org, which will take you to our landing page here. And then if you click on the menu and go to, I can't see this because of, okay, and go to resources. Seriously, this is going to be your best friend. This in the Slack, but I know it can get hard to find things in Slack. This is where I'm trying to put everything that, we have the original project proposal here, that asking for an NDSR resident. There's Jamie's blog, our final report, our LibGuide, the grant application that we put out to create the network, which has changed a bit since we've gotten increased funding, but you can see that. There's our first cohort call for partner applications. I'll have to put our second cohort call up there too. And then we have, so if you want to, get an idea of what boot camp is going to be like, you can see our cohort 1 boot camp training. I'm going to click on that, and I just walk through our, it was 9 to like 4:30 pretty much every day, and you get to see what we did, where we went, and then if we have something that I want to point out to, like a PowerPoint or an activity that we did, you can just click on that link and it'll jump out there. So you guys can see that you're going to cover all of this. Absolutely. We might have a little different of tours for you guys. It's just based on availability, but we are going to cover this, and I will send you all also like a detailed itinerary once we firm it up of where we're trying to do that in the next couple weeks, of where the tours will be, so we know exactly what is happening on each day. At least we have the first 3 webinars, on the books, so that's good. And we do, we're having it at the time that we said. So next week, Nick is going to start really contacting you guys for travel arrangements. And just to keep going through the resources, because I really, really want you guys to look at these. The monthly webinars are just gonna like really if you want to watch these, like, this is gonna get you jump started. If you guys have any downtime and want to like prepare, then if you click on the month, it'll take you out to a video. And it's a video on OSF, which isn't the best like video streaming thing. So you can you can't like jump to a point in the video. So if you want to skip over me saying like and ah a lot, that's totally reasonable. So what you should do is just like download the MP4, and then you can use your video player and jump through it. So anyway, if you click on the month, that'll take you to the video. But then we also have any of the extra stuff that they sent, if there was a PowerPoint and slides, or extra documentation that they sent. And it's just a lot of fun stuff to learn more about. And we're going to be doing this with you guys too. So then if you look at what we've done, we can and start thinking about what you want us to cover, maybe a project that you're like really curious about, we can reach out to them and have their project manager or head of that project come and talk. So just keep that in back of your head. And then here we have our personal archiving class slide decks. So you can look, and this is like, you guys are going to copy this, you know, you guys are going to teach these classes, and you're going to teach your staff to teach these classes, but just to start getting an idea of what they are. And we have these as Google Slides so that so here's your digital afterlife. When like one of the tools or links breaks, I can just go into the Google slide and change it. And it's updated and I don't have to like worry about link rot and things like that. So we've got your digital afterlife and then a nice class description so you guys don't have to come up with any of that. Personal archiving with Facebook, class description, digital preservation, the basics for saving your photos. I want to have like a digital preservation, the basics for saving your audio as well. And then we have the preserve your home movies, the basics for saving your moving images. And then lastly, we have our video tutorials that I've started. You know, I sent you guys using Slack, which is still pretty relevant. Also, like, this is just all stuff that I'm going to ask you to do in the future, like create an inventory on your equipment that you guys get in from donations. And so I teach you how to use, like, really, because not everyone has, uses spreadsheets in their daily librarian work. So this is my favorite tips and tricks on spreadsheets. And oh my God, I talked for 35 minutes about spreadsheets. I don't know how I did that, but I'm obviously in the right profession. So, and then I have I'm starting to do more very hands-on AV little demo things that people have asked me for, like setting up your VHS station. Why do we have these CRT monitors? And I show that reasoning. I did record, and I just haven't put it on the website, how to clean a deck, how to clean your SVHS deck, and a few other ones. Yeah. So, and I'm going to just keep, and as you guys go along and you're like, this would make a really great video tutorial, then you can tell me. And my goal is like, I just take them with my phone right now. And the goal hopefully will be to make these more professional in the future. But for now, it's sort of like, also, like, if you watch one of these and you're like, hey, it didn't really answer my question about X, Y, and Z. I need you to tell me that so that when we do, I need all of the feedback from you guys. I'm not taking it personal or anything. Like, it's just like, so that way we can make it better, because that's what the plan is for the next, for the second cohort, is just to like hone and make it better and make it easier for people to create their memory labs. So that is what I have today. I want to open up and I will stop sharing, and then I'm gonna unmute everyone. Don't all talk at once, but so that way we can. And I mean, if you're not comfortable being unmuted, also you can totally mute yourself again, but I just want to encourage you, if you want to be speaking, that please, oh, good. Brandon says that he just Facebook messaged his friend who works at the local TV station. Very exciting. And Jonathan says, I like Slack. I'm so glad, right? Like, once you discover how to like use the GIFs and stuff, so much fun. So yeah, any questions? That's a lot of info.
Siobhan, this is Muriel Jackson in Macon, Georgia.
Hi.
I'm already drafting in my head the letter to go beg. Mm-hmm. What logos would we use on these letters and so forth? Because we've had a local TV station that has just finished renovating their entire studio. So if I want to go with a letter next week or the week after, would I use the MemLab logo. I've seen you use the IMLS logo. I know we'll be using our library logo, but what are the correct logos that we have?
I will send, very great question. I will send you the official MemLab, DCPL MemLab Network logo, and then an IMLS logo would be great as well, since it's all funded through them. So it's just those two. So I will just, but like IMLS, I'll send you a link to where IMLS has all their logos, because they have multiple ones, of course, depending on like what your PowerPoint looks like. So I'll send a link in Slack to IMLS logos, and then downloadable, high quality, high res of our logo.
Pretty.
Great question.
Oh, Siobhan, so we have a question. It's Zach and Suzanne from Chesapeake. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So we had a question about when you let people do it, use everything on their own or whatever in these drop-ins and that kind of thing. They don't have to be like have an orientation. How is that going, and how, like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out ways to de-stress my staff here. So
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
Yeah, I don't think I want to convince you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you want to de-stress your staff, then that is a very easy way to do it, is to have a required orientation. I personally feel like it would be great. I think that we should do that and I definitely know a few staff members that feel that way as well. But like, I think that you're going to need as much de-stressing as possible. So it just seems like it also makes the users less stressed as well. Like, it just like is less stress all around. I guess the only thing that the only con of it is that it might, like, maybe some people just don't want to talk to other people, and they don't want, like, they're better learners on their own, and they wouldn't then want to, but I just can't imagine, it's only 1 hour, it's like, just come, just, do it. And I can't imagine that it would, considering it's a free thing, and I don't imagine that would stop a very large set of users. And if it did, I'm sure that those users, and they really wanted to use the MemLab, I'm sure that they would let you know, and then you can rethink it.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
I have a related question.
And who's this?
Sorry, this is Anna and Heather in Little Rock.
Hi.
The partners that have used mobile labs, how have they done orientation type classes?
Well, unfortunately for Karuk, there has been a horrible timing problem. So theirs is not up and running yet. So there's, as far as the orientation and things like that, we haven't worked that out yet. Now, Frederick County Public Library, the one that is in Maryland, that is more mobile, I believe what they do is it's more of like an orientation because they travel to the branches like for a day, right? And so it's sort of like it's a little bit less DIY, I think. So I think that they either like travel to the branch, do the orientation, and then whoever did the orientation can use the equipment. And it's sort of like a community day kind of thing. What I would recommend is that, yeah, you have traveling orientations, and it's sort of like, okay, here's the orientation, we're going to do the orientation, and then, like, depending how far apart your branches are, then you need to, and you want to have your appointments then scheduled for those people that took the orientation. So it might be like multiple days, like where we're like, okay, here we're gonna do, you know, an orientation or like maybe 3 orientations that day for people like after work, for people that don't have to go to work, you know, retirees, whatnot, do it during the day and then do another one. So that way people can get their orientations out of the way. And then just be like, we'll be back in, you know, next month or whatever with our slew of appointments. Or does that answer your question? Is that somewhat helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. And don't worry, we're going to get correct up and running this spring. So then we'll have a better answer for you before you guys get started.
Cool.
Other questions, logistics. Also, things that someone has already asked me, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I wrote it down because I can never remember exactly anything. Something that they asked me about, like polling the first cohort. So is there anything that maybe you guys can think of that you want to know from the first cohort, like other than like how did the mobile one work? Because obviously that we haven't done that yet, but something else. And you can always, you know, Slack this to me later. Something that I can poll them and ask them, like, you know, what I'm gonna do this. What scheduling software is everyone using? That might have been the question. Did I hear someone? Or was it a ghost in the Zoom? Oh, I think it was something like how often they're open or something like that. So I'm just throwing out ideas to kind of get you guys, you know, like those logistics, like staffing, how many days are you open? How many days are you closed?
Siobhan, Muriel Jackson, I'm just curious if any of the first cohorts or any of the other people you've talked to have looked at creating maybe a second lab for like the scanning of the images and so forth, whatever's more heavily used, and I'm thinking probably photographs and things. Have they looked at trying to set up a second for that versus
in like a different branch?
Or even a different room in the same building or a different table?
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of, yeah, I'm trying to think. I haven't visited all of them. At LA Public Library, it's in their entire labs department. It's like their whole labs, and they're just like these booths that you know, sort of like cubbies, you know, those reading cubbies, but also like way fancier. And so there's the AV booth, and then there's like, you also have your like laser scanner booth, your 3D printer booth, and then your actual scanner, transparency scanner booth. So definitely, there have definitely been folks that, you know, these are 2 different stations and you can have them both going at one time. That's how we recommend it, since they're both so popular, to get in. So when you do your scheduling, you'll be like, okay, we have 4 3-hour blocks today, or 3 3-hour blocks today for AV. And then we have 3 3-hour blocks for the scanning station. And some people double book those because they want to go back and forth, and we allow that. But they just have to sign up for both of them. Or you might have 2 people using the different computer stations. So we have had some people decide to get a lower quality scanner, transparency scanner, to take out to branches, because the scanner that we have, I do have to say, I don't recommend moving that huge scanner. We're gonna get it. We're gonna give it to you guys, and then just keep it in your special collections, really, and let the public use it every now and again. But basically, if you want something more mobile, we will work on getting you a more mobile scanner, because if you move that scanner, it's gonna break and it costs so much money. We don't want that. So that's typically where people will get a still high quality Epson transparency scanner, but it can't do the oversize, and it's much more portable. You can get like a Pelican case on wheels to move it around.
Ariel, my library, we have a RetroTech lab working currently, and we're actually, like, why we're so excited about this project is that we're actually exploring doing a mobile focus with this project for it. So.
And tell us who you are again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Todd. I'm with the Hagan County Library.
So. I thought so, but just so everyone, yeah, cool.
So yeah, so we have a lot of the gadgets, but without the training, and I think this will be a very exciting opportunity.
Yeah, and I think you guys will bring a lot to the network through your experience.
Done a lot of flying blind.
Yeah. Well, we will take the blindfold off. Yeah. I heard someone else having a question.
I'm wondering if anyone's partnered with a makerspace for small electronic repairs, working back and forth with providing equipment.
That's a great idea, and I fully recommend that. That is, since we have that's sort of like our labs as a makerspace of sorts, although they don't do too many electronic repairs. But for example, like we've had 3D printers print out little parts to things that we can like send out to people. And then also we have put in our documentation that for the like fourth, I think we're in the third year of the grant, like goes from like July to June. So we're like, I guess we're halfway through. Oh God, year 3-ish. Then it's in year 4 and year 5 that we are planning on doing more of that. If you guys want to do that work for me, wonderful. Because yeah, we're planning on like hiring consultants in those years in order to figure out what parts we can 3D print to make sure to keep your decks going, what we can train you guys on how to repair your stuff, because that's the main thing. We want you to be able to repair, not have to buy a whole new, piece of equipment. So, and then maybe if it's like, if you can't do it, then we find other ways, and local partners to assist. So that is a wonderful idea. And start looking, if you don't have a makerspace or a department that's something like that, I recommend starting to do that work now, especially if you have time now, maybe, because it's gonna get hectic later.
Oh, hi, this is Andrea from the Free Library of Philadelphia. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, great. So the question I have is, the library we're looking to put the memory lab in is a Carnegie library. It's about 105 years old. And I can see us maybe running into problems with like wiring and electricity. Are there any other memory labs in older libraries that have run into issues like that with older buildings? Anyone that maybe can talk to the potential issues?
Ooh, that is such a great question. I am thinking, because like our MLK library is from the 70s, and then the Northeast is from the 30s, so it's not really that old. And they're both, MLK is being renovated and Northeast has been renovated. Anyone out there, since I am in a over 100-year-old building?
Our building's multiple
centuries.
We have 3 buildings all jammed together. So we've had of electronic problems in each of the different buildings from different centuries.
And sorry, you said what types of problems? We just lost you a little there.
Well, there's one of them.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, notice I am not actually at DCPL right now because I wanted good internet. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Our internet drops out on a regular basis, I would say.
But even more, just the infrastructure of running lines. Our IT department, we've had to work really close with them just to be able to find places where we can run lines.
Great. Yeah, the main issue with power that I see, as long as you have like a few outlets that are grounded, then in around one space, we could potentially like put the scanner far away from the AV station, right? If that's what's needed, that's fine. And just have separate signage and whatnot. Now, yeah, the main thing is you need, you know, the power conditioner is going to be there, and that's what you plug the power conditioner into the grounded outlet, and then you plug all of the stuff from the AV rack, you know, within that system into the power conditioner. You're not going to plug your computer into that, so you'll need to have like a power strip that plugs into the wall, and then plug your computer into that and any computer peripherals besides the AV stuff. So the power conditioner is going to condition the power basically and just make sure that there's not any ugly interference coming in. And maybe we decide with the older buildings, we also buy like a fancier version of that. You know, they can go from, you know, kind of middle of the run, which is kind of what we're buying, like around $90, and we could go up if that's what we decide is going to be a potential issue. And, you know, for the scanner, it's really just like, you just have you just need like a power strip, a newer power strip plugged in to the wall, to the grounded outlet, and then you plug in your scanner and your computer into that. But that is a great question. I'm pretty sure that none of our first cohort are in like that old of buildings.
All right. Well, I have a lot. Most of the questions I have right now are actually for our buildings and IT team. So let me follow up with them.
Yeah.
And for
great.
figuring out the space of where the actual lab in. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, aren't you guys are you going to be moving eventually too? I thought that there was going to be a renovation of sorts. Am I remembering wrong?
Yes. So you're right. So in Philadelphia, they're doing this program called Rebuild, where the city's putting more in, like just helping to update infrastructure in libraries and rec centers, because a lot of our libraries and rec centers are 100 years old or even a little bit older. And so potentially in the next year or two, they're going to start groundbreaking on that library. So, but the thing is, there's other libraries in the area, but they're all actually around 100 years old. Most of them are other Carnegie libraries. So we might have to move, but we still have to move probably to another 100-year-old Carnegie library.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And I mean, you know, as long as it's getting to the community, that's like the main thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess another thing I didn't really think about, that I'm like thinking about this interim space that Special Collections is at now, while we're in between, you know, MLK. And there are certain walls that do like have water that run down it during certain times. It has nothing to do with rain. It just is like, or it's more about rain accumulating on the roof than actually the HVAC and things like that. So when you think about like interim spaces too, and that's a pretty old building now that I think about it, it's at least from the teens. Oh yeah, that's 100. Wow. That think about like, yeah, like you said, just talk to facilities, be like, hey, is there water issues here? And like all they do at DCPL is like just move a trash can over there, and then like, yeah, don't keep anything important over here. But like, so yeah, you want to make sure that you know, and that's only during certain times of the year. So like if we had put something there like a memory lab during the time of year that doesn't happen. So just really have a nice, keep facilities and IT as your besties, no matter how much they might get under your skin.
Will do.
Siobhan, have you had any issues with the content of folks, like the content of the materials or anything related to copyright?
Great question, and it is a question that we got from our first cohort, and amazingly, yeah, there's not really an issue, and that's something about privacy where it's nicer to give people a little bit of privacy if you can. We couldn't in the Northeast Library, it's just not an option. Where if someone has something more sensitive in nature that maybe they don't want, I mean, like in my time, I have digitized a birth video, and that really surprised me. So, you know, that could be something that could pop up. And mainly it's kind of the same thing as, you know, what we do and what your policy should be on, you know, a lot of times people are worried about pornographic material coming up and what they should do about that, what policy they should have. And it's sort of like, well, what do you do when or if someone does that in the computer lab, right? So what is your policy on that? And, you know, so we've shared in Slack what our policy is. I don't work in a branch, so I don't remember that off the top of my head, but I, for some reason, feel like it's sort of like, you know, like if it's going to be something that is going to potentially make other library staff or patrons uncomfortable, then we have the right to tell the person to stop. Copyright, we say in our in the release form, I believe, yes, in the release form, that like we are not held responsible for any copyright infringement. We leave that, typically the librarians don't have time or energy or the wherewithal to be watching what people are digitizing, and a lot of times they can't, you know, like, so we just are not liable because we have everyone sign that form, and we, you know, say like that they shouldn't do that. But also we realize that it's squishy sometimes, and then there are like tapes where I had, you know, it says on the back copyright. I've seen someone brought one in, it said copyright, and it named a company, and like the person did all of this due diligence of trying to find the company, find a digital copy online to buy so that their kids could listen to this tape that they grew up listening to. And it was like a book and tape thing, and they still had the book, and they wanted and I was like, that's adorable. You need to have this digital file, you know what I mean? So they did the work, and also they like came to us and was, you know, like, oh, I don't want to infringe. I want to buy a copy, but this company doesn't exist anymore. And you know, it's sort of like they did their due diligence. They tried to buy a digital copy, and they signed the waiver. So they're also taking any infringement upon themselves, right? All the liability upon themselves. But that's just like something I would tell a patron if they're like, can I bring in my Disney movie? Then I would just say, that's a copyright infringement, and we don't recommend that. There's plenty of digital files out there. But then if it's a random Disney TV movie, well, maybe not Disney because Disney's still around, but you know what I'm saying. A company that's not around to collect, then leave it to them to make that decision and still sign the waiver.
Yeah. Good this way.
Any other questions? And so yeah, logistics wise, I'm going to be meeting, I think, Tuesday with Nick, and we're going to try and at least get started on the travel arrangements. I know some of you might be out next week as it's Thanksgiving, but so please, please, please get Nick your travel information as soon as possible so he can get cracking on that. You know, like he needs all that information so that he can book, that I sent in the email, so that he can book your airfare and your hotel. And then, yeah, because we're going to do a big booking in one fell swoop for the hotel. So please send that as soon as possible. And then I'm trying to think of anything else that I'm missing here. Oh, right. And then, you know, I think I can't remember which one, but I know for one of them, and we have three staff members who are, you know, on the project, but only 2 will be able to come. So you'll have to let us know which ones those are. And then, yeah, if you have any specifically like travel questions, I would say refer those to Nick, because he's going to be doing all that and he has that power to make those decisions. I would just be like filtering it to him. And then as far as when the money part will be happening, like getting your money for the equipment, it won't be coming to you guys until after boot camp, because you're not going to want to purchase anything until you've done a lot of that ask for donations, right? So that you know what you get in. So start doing that now. I really do think that and even if you don't know what the heck it is, as long as you have a place to put it, then I can start answering your questions and being like, oh, keep that, don't keep that. We'll start creating an inventory and things like that. But you're not going to be able to really start buying things until well after you get home and are rested and we have a few more, meetings.
Siobhan, this
Yes.
is Muriel Jackson. This may be a silly question, but weather-wise, I know it's going to be probably snow on the ground. Is there any recommended, how much walking are we going to be doing? I was trying to get some well-lined boots to use as well as shoes and, that kind of stuff.
Yes, I do agree. It's luckily, January can be just so up in the air here. It can be snowy, and then it could not, but it will be cold. I'm pretty positive about that. Probably around freezing. Luckily, we don't go too much below the 20s ever is typical, so it's not too bad. But yeah, we were not thrilled about doing it in January, but we just could not figure out another time. So I would say definitely warm clothing, but then we're trying to get a hotel that is close to Northeast. That would either be a very, very short lift or cab ride, or would be like a half mile or less for walking. That answers that question, which is definitely not a silly question at all. Yeah, bring gloves, bring hats.
Is this being, are we going to get those slides, or is this being recorded so we can review it?
Both.
Good.
Yeah, I'm going to be sending along the slides, and then I've been recording.
Nice.
That will also go up.
Yeah.
And all of that will be, links will be sent through Slack.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much took your home.
Other question? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, yay, that was fun. Thank you all so much for coming. And if you have other questions, either reach out to me. If you feel like it's something that other people could benefit from learning the answer to, do it in one of those public channels on Slack. Or if it's something that's like very unique to your organization or don't want people publicly seeing, then just do a private message to me on Slack. That would be great. So yeah, I'm here to help you guys, and I hope you all have a great holiday next week, and then I will see you in December for our next webinar.